Thanks for having me.
Daniel, can you tell us 57 homicides in 35 days? Tell us how you got this assignment to document the president's war on drugs. Did you volunteer for this, or was this thrust on you? Was this assigned to you?
This was a story which I pitched to my editor a number of weeks prior to my arrival, which was in late September. And I'd been following the story, and I'd seen in July and in early August, disturbing imagery coming out of the Philippines, and a lot of reports of the, I suppose, the brutality of what was going on, which was already being reported by local media. And a number of weeks later, my editor called me up and assigned me, and I flew out immediately.
Were you, well, I suppose in a way, because it is a story, you were looking forward to it?
How do you mean I was looking forward to it?
Well, looking forward to covering the story, to telling the story.
I was interested in getting out there and trying to understand what was going on, yes, yeah.
I see. Daniel, can you tell us what exactly were you looking for? Were you trying to find evidence, or what was it that you were looking for when you came here to Manila?
Every time I go out on assignment, I'm always open-minded, and I go out to find out what the situation is. And I joined a group of local journalists who were connected with, or who worked for your largest newspapers there in Manila, and I accompanied them to all of the crime scenes that I covered over that period of time. I worked closely with Filipino journalists and spent 35 days every single day on the street, speaking to families, going to crime scenes and speaking to victims and families, the people who were affected.
So you would stay at the police stations overnight and then wait for any reports that would come in. These are the night shift reporters, and you would go with them whenever you would hear that something had happened.
Yes, and then during the day I was following up with families and following up the stories and following up on a lot of the scenes and in a lot of the neighborhoods that we'd been in, the night before.
Yeah. There's a portion in your article, Daniel, where you show Google map and then 57 yellow dots depicting these people whose killings you documented. Tell us more about that. Why did you feel the need to do that?
I just wanted to show how widespread it was. There's actually 41 dots. It was 41 crime scenes that we covered, and there were 47 victims at these 41 crime scenes because a number of the locations actually had 4 people who were killed in one house. And the idea was to, I suppose, show the scattering and show exactly where this was happening across Manila and what I had actually come across during that period of time.
There's a word of warning early on in the early part of the article, and we quote, many of the images depict graphic violence, and they do. Why the need to show those very graphic images?
I think it's important to show the reality of what's happening wherever we are, and if it's sometimes it is graphic, then I think it's important for people to see what's happening and see the effects that this is having on local communities.
The stories you told, Daniel, of families of the victims were very interesting because you were describing basically just what they were saying and what they were doing, the looks on their faces. Did you also get to speak to police officers, not just those who were on the ground with you in those crime scenes, but police officers back in the stations, in headquarters? Were there like any explanations as to what was going on?
We would get briefings because we went out on a number of police raids with the police in Tondo and then also in Pasig, and we would be there in their briefings as they're going out on a lot of their raids. So we kind of sat in on their briefings and spent time with them. Yes.
Daniel, it seems like you immersed yourself in, well, not just the story, but the language, the lingo that was and still is being used till this day. When we have stories like these, you use the words tokhang, nanlaban, buy bust, wag tularan. When you first heard those words, did you wonder what they meant, and how did you react to them as a journalist, as a photojournalist?
I was shocked in many ways that this kind of language was becoming common speak, and people were, referring to these kind of killings as writing in tandem. A lot of people were talking about Nanlaban. It was alarming that this kind of vocabulary was part of vocabulary that was being used and was being used openly. I was reading it in newspapers. I was reading it in reports. It was openly being used.
It's been quite a while since you were here, and then the article, of course, just came out. So you've had a little bit more time to reflect, and sometimes that's what we do as journalists, right? After a story, weeks after a story, a month after a story, we think about it. What are your thoughts about your story right now?
What are my thoughts about the story? I'm glad that finally the story is out. A lot of the scenes and a lot of the images have been haunting me over that period of time, and I have colleagues who are still there, who are still covering the night shift, and this is something that while I've been gone has been continuing, every single day and every single night. So I suppose I'm glad that the story is out and that people are being informed of, not only one side of the story that is being reported sometimes in the media, but also the other side of the story, of the reality of how this war is affecting communities and people on the ground.
My final question, Daniel, I'd like to quote something you wrote. You said, and I quote, "I have worked in 60 countries, covered wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and spent much of 2014 living inside West Africa's Ebola zone, a place gripped by fear and death. What I experienced in the Philippines felt like a new level of ruthlessness." What are you saying here?
What am I saying?
Yes. What are you trying to impart when you say that?
I'm trying to impart that I was covering crime scene by crime scene every single evening. And it seemed like that, and everyone that we spoke to on the ground felt that this was something, and especially with President Duterte's language, saying that he's going to slaughter 20,000, 30,000 more, and he will keep on continuing. Seeing the effects of those words on the street was incredibly alarming, and that's what I meant by that.
Daniel Berehulak, photojournalist, contributor to the New York Times. Thank you very much for joining us.